Thank you so much to everyone for inviting me back to be here with you all today. I'm just thrilled to be part of the LBBC conference again, and with TNBC and everybody else here. It's just wonderful to see you all virtually, and this is just going to be a great program and a wonderful weekend. I still just think so fondly about the connections that I made and the women that I got to meet in Memphis a few years ago. So I do want to encourage everyone, as Jean mentioned, to please type questions into the Q&A throughout this presentation. We're going to have a few points where we stop and answer your questions, and then I will also leave some time at the end. And I will also include lots of ways that you can get in touch with me later if you think of another question down the road, or for whatever reason you don't want to type it into the Q&A, that's fine. And we're going to do a few activities so that it really feels very connected and involved. So I'll be directing you to the chat or the Q&A throughout. But most importantly, this is really a time for me to connect with you and to help you with topics and questions that are top of mind. And nutrition and fitness really are. So I just want to kick off with a quote. Eleanor Roosevelt has many wonderful quotes, but I like this one for this presentation because she says, "It takes as much energy to wish as it does to plan." And there are so many things going on in all of our lives, but especially for you when you're dealing with treatment and everything else you have going on, effects of treatment that happen later, we really want to be planning. So my hope today is that you leave this presentation with some concrete action steps. So don't be afraid to take notes and write down something that resonates with you so that you can really leave with something concrete to take along with you. So we're going to look at nutrition and fitness for cancer survivorship and really take a deep dive into these topics. Science has shown us that nutrition and physical activity are really some of the best ways that you can take control over your energy level, supporting your immune system, feeding your metabolism, and helping you achieve an active lifestyle that you're trying to maintain and to manage the experience or the severity of treatment-related side effects. We're going to really try to touch on all of these topics because I know that for everybody joining, you all are at a different phase in this fight against breast cancer. And so I want to make sure that you can understand how the information is relevant to you at any point in that journey. We're going to go through some very concrete strategies and pro tips. So understanding the latest science about balancing hormones, supporting your immune system, really chilling out inflammation and trying to quiet some of those aches and pains. How can you protect your heart, your brain, and your gut, and then manage things like sleep and mood? So before we get into a lot of the details, which trust me, I have plenty of details to share, I want to start at a higher level and kind of a concept and big picture space and start with the evidence, because one of the things that we're going to talk about is this idea of internet nutrition or the guru or kind of the misinformation that is out there, and how can you sift through the fiction and understand the facts. So we're going to start with just basic facts, and I'm not going to read all of these details. Number one, I'm pretty sure most of you are aware of a lot of these things. And second of all, you can refer back to some of this at a later point, but we're going to touch on many of these factors. So how important it is to limit excess amounts of sugar or red meats, why it's important to be active, eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, limiting alcohol consumption, etc. So this is where the evidence lies, and this is where there is a lot of research looking at survivorship. A study published earlier this year in January of 2020 was really trying to look at articles that were review articles and randomized trials. And the take-home message is that we're going to revisit. So I like to call it like a parking lot. We're going to put some of these topics in the parking lot, and we're going to come back to them. But things that stood out when the researchers looked at many studies all together were in terms of macronutrients, so fat, protein, and carbs. It was most important for women to follow a more low-fat eating style. So we're going to parking lot that because I'm sure keto is a question that people have. In terms of micronutrients, so things like vitamins, minerals, and other plant-based nutrients, Eating phytoestrogen-rich foods, so plant-based foods that happen to have a weak estrogenic effect, like tofu and edamame. We're going to parking lot that and come back to it because I'm sure soy is a question on your mind, but that those phytoestrogens were beneficial and that overall a healthy diet was helpful in overall survival and reducing risk of heart disease. So we're going to come back to those topics, but I wanted to share them now in the evidence section so that you understand there is constantly new research evolving and emerging. And even in 2020, when life is crazy, there is still more information that we can learn from being shared from researchers. So we want to trust the science and we want to try to temper the noise and the static of some of the internet stuff or social media stuff that we're all bombarded with. What about symptom management? Again, this is high level, thinking about some of those evidence-based points. So making a plan is critical, especially if your appetite is low. Getting ahead, whether it's taking medications like anti-nausea medicines or using a nutrition and activity strategy to help, let's say, promote gut health. Getting ahead, doing something a little preventively before it becomes a full-blown challenge is where you're going to find the most benefit and the most success. Taking notes, which I hope everyone is doing today, is something that can help you. So jotting down details about your experience so that you can speak up and advocate with your family, with anybody else involved in being a caregiver, and absolutely with your treatment team. Eating and drinking often and moving often, this is what you want to have on repeat throughout your day. And we're going to focus a little bit more on that. But small bouts of food, of beverages, of activity, of rest, of stress management, infusing small amounts more often is really the sweet spot throughout your day. Okay, so now we're going to dive into nutrition to support immunity and promote cancer survivorship. Let's really understand what does this mean. And I'm sure it is no surprise that the first thing we're going to talk about are fruits and vegetables. But I want to be a little bit more specific. You've probably heard the expression eat the rainbow, and that is a really good way for you to think about, am I doing it right? Am I getting enough? Am I doing this in the right way? So first of all, if you're trying, then the answer is yes, you're doing it right. We just need to put some time and effort in and not get too stressed out on making sure you're having the exact right vegetable. They kind of exist in categories. And a lot of those categories come from their color or their pigment. So what makes a tomato red, or what makes a sweet potato orange, what makes broccoli green, blueberries blue, or garlic white, those color compounds not only help the plant's immune system, they also help our immune system. And each color family is healthy for a different reason, and they're all beneficial. So we want to get that robust variety to help really strengthen our immune system from many different angles. And we want to skip sugary, artificially colored options and just go for simple, delicious ingredients instead. Fruits and vegetables give us vitamins that help our immune system, like vitamin C. They give us minerals for our immune system, like magnesium or zinc. They give us those plant-based compounds, those phytonutrients that have additional benefits like antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds. They give us electrolytes. One of the key side effects of treatment, whether it's chemo, radiation, surgery, or even honestly a side effect of exercising or warm temperature, is loss of electrolytes. So when we lose electrolytes through sweat, through more frequent bowel movements, through cells erupting and dying in the treatment process, we need to replenish them. If we don't replenish our electrolytes, we feel more fatigued, we feel more lethargic. You might feel your legs and your arms feel kind of heavy. You might feel dizzy or weak, especially with exertion. Sometimes this is because your electrolytes are low, and a really great way to replenish them is having more fruits and vegetables in your diet, maybe in a beverage like a smoothie, or eating them. They also give us hydration, which we know is critical for metabolism and for energy. Okay, we can also better recover from exercise by eating the rainbow. Now, whole grains, oh my goodness, how in the world have carbohydrates become just as polarizing as politics? We're not talking about politics, we're only talking about nutrition, but sometimes it feels just as anxiety provoking. So I want to take the stress down, and actually carbohydrate rich foods can help you lower your stress. So we want to be eating them. We already talked about the research showing that women going through breast cancer and for survivorship want to be following a more low-fat style eating pattern. Well, we get calories from macronutrients, and there are three options there: carbs, fats, and protein. Well, and alcohol has calories, but we're going to talk about limiting that in a moment. So we're thinking about fats, protein, and carbs. So we need protein, but we need carbs too. We do not want to be on a low carb diet for weight loss if you have been diagnosed with breast cancer, especially for an estrogen receptor negative breast cancer. That is where the research is strongest about lower fat. So we need to have some whole grains in there. Okay. We also know that whole grains give us essential vitamins and minerals. We get B vitamins and magnesium, which we need for metabolism. And we also get prebiotic fiber. So fibers that help feed the healthy bacteria already living in our gut, our microbiome. So we want to balance our carbs. We don't want to go overboard, and we want to make healthy choices, but we do want to eat them. So if you had oatmeal for breakfast, if you had a slice of toast for breakfast, feel good about that choice. Don't feel guilty about it. If you ate potatoes for dinner last night, you are on track. And if anyone tells you differently, you can just send them to me and I can let them know what the science shows. Okay, healthy fats. Now, I've talked about low fat. That doesn't mean zero. We need to have some healthy fats in our diet. They help us regulate our hunger and fullness mechanisms. They give us electrolytes. Avocado is an excellent source of potassium, just like bananas are. Same thing with like nuts and nut butters. Those are healthy fats that give us all kinds of vitamins and minerals that we need. Everything from anti-inflammatory omega-3s in like walnuts and pumpkin seeds to selenium for immunity and metabolism, which is found in Brazil nuts. Those are just a couple examples, but we want to enjoy them in a balance. And so we're going to understand, well, what does she mean when she says a balance? What does that actually translate into? Okay, so I mentioned lots of concrete things you can take away with you. So this is a really simple picture and a strategy that you can take anywhere. You don't have to be, counting calories and measuring grams. You can do this in a proportionate way. You want half of your plate to be vegetables, particularly non-starchy vegetables. And there's other research that's been shown recently that non-starchy vegetables, like cruciferous vegetables, that would be things like broccoli, cauliflower, radishes, arugula, kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. I don't know if I missed any heavy hitters there. Cauliflower, did I say that? The cruciferous, that gassy vegetable family, those are examples that are really helpful for women in terms of breast cancer survivorship. Same thing with those orange, those carotenoid-rich vegetables like carrots, sweet potato, butternut squash, acorn squash, spaghetti squash, all the squashes, all those fall vegetables like pumpkin. Those two categories in the rainbow have pretty good research as being important for breast cancer survivorship. So you're going to want to have half your plate be veggies, like a salad, those, broccoli, things like that. Another quarter of your plate is going to be whole grains. So that might be quinoa, that might be brown rice, that might be farro, etc. And then another quarter as a protein, which could be animal-based, like salmon that you see here, chicken or eggs. You could also have a plant-based protein there, like lentils or beans. And some of these foods exist in more than one category, right? So beans have a little starch, but if you're counting them as a protein, you put them in the protein section, and then we sprinkle some healthy fats on top. Okay, we're gonna do a quick activity. You're gonna use the chat for this. And I want everyone to go into the chat and you're gonna type away. And I'm gonna keep going a little bit, but I want you to go ahead and go in there and type your favorite items. When I say eat the rainbow, what do you think of? What are your favorite plant-based foods that exist in the rainbow that you enjoy eating? You can list the food like kale, You don't have to like kale. You could say apples or whatever. You could say a recipe. You could say smoothie. You could share your recipe. But let's all go ahead and go nuts and type in anything plant-based within the rainbow that you enjoy so that we can get ideas from each other of items to have. So if I look at the chat now, wow, I see all kinds of awesome choices here. So I encourage everyone to type and to take a look and to check that out. Okay, I just in the interest of time, I'm gonna keep going here as you're typing into the chat, and these all look amazing. We'll get to some time and a checkpoint for questions in a little bit, just not quite yet. And I am just, bear with me, closing off my chat. Okay, so let's keep going here and talk a little bit about the foods and the beverages that we actually want to be limiting when we're thinking about promoting cancer survivorship. So there's no surprises here. It's the execution that's really hard, right? So when we think about food and beverages to limit, we're gonna get more into some of these topics, but caffeine is something absolutely you can have your coffee or tea. In fact, coffee and tea have cancer-fighting properties. However, if you're suffering from hot flashes, caffeine is something that contributes to more hot flashes. So you might want to limit yourself to like a cup in the morning. We'll come back to that. Ultra-processed foods, that's the new lingo for like junk food, okay? So foods that have been overly processed, especially those high in added sugars, are things that we want to limit. We're going to talk about sugar and cancer in just a second here. Alcohol, we know excess alcohol intake is a risk factor for developing breast cancer. And so we want to keep alcohol in check. Guidelines are getting stricter on what is defined as a serving of alcohol because 2020 has absolutely, understandably, been a time for many people where alcohol consumption has gone up for coping and for stress management. So we want to be mindful about that when it comes to breast cancer. Another category that we want to limit, when we think about fats, we want to be picky about the type. So the pictures you saw of like chia and olive oil and avocado is really great because those are healthy fats. Limiting saturated fat and processed meats. So saturated fats like in red meat, in full fat dairy, even in coconut, processed meats like bacon. These are things that are shown to increase risk of developing certain types of cancers, including breast cancer. So it doesn't mean don't ever have them, but we want to keep them a little bit more limited. Now, what about sugar and cancer? I think this is probably one of the #1 questions that I hear as a nutritionist. And so I'm going to try to explain this briefly, and I want you to have two take-home pieces of information concepts I want you to understand. So does sugar cause cancer like smoking or environmental hazards or UV light initiates or causes cancer? No. Does sugar contribute to cancer risk? Yes, in certain contexts. What are those contexts? So that's what I want you to understand. So #1, it is not a direct relationship. If you eat a fun-sized pack of Halloween candy, that does not mean 5 new cancer cells grow immediately. There's no direct relationship like that. How does sugar influence cancer risk? There are 2 things to think about in terms of what the evidence shows us. So #1, there is a relationship through contributing to unwanted body fat and obesity, and particularly kind of increasing body fatness and decreasing muscle mass. Now, I hate these words because they're just misused and awful in our culture and society. So when we talk about body fatness, it has nothing to do with the size of a person's body. So you can have a larger bodied person who can be working out and eating healthy foods and have a higher ratio of muscle to fat. And that's not what we're talking about. So we're not talking about BMI or body mass index. We're talking about your own body composition, which is influenced by things like hormones and exercise and diet. So I hope that makes sense. But when we particularly consume excess, those ultra-processed refined sugars, whether it's in candy or baked goods or in sugar-sweetened beverages like energy drinks and sodas and juice, that kind of added sugar, refined sugar, leads to excess calories that don't offer nutrients and tends to increase body fatness. And that increase in body fatness does increase risk of developing 13 different types of cancers. So sugar is one way people will shift body composition away from muscle and towards the body fatness, which can also increase risk of diabetes and heart disease and other chronic illness. The second way sugar might influence cancer risk, again, isn't that direct, I ate sugar. It's how does your body respond when you do eat sugar? And so if you have something really sweet all by itself, so let's say you haven't eaten anything yet and you drink an iced coffee with tons of sugar added into it, let's say, then when you drink a lot of sugar, your body is going to respond by shooting out insulin. And insulin is a hormone that we need to move that sugar out of our blood and into our cells for energy. Now, what happens though is that insulin does other things too. And so insulin is actually a growth factor, meaning that it promotes growth in the body. So for somebody at risk or somebody who is dealing with cancer or a survivor of cancer, we don't want to do anything that is going to promote all kinds of extra growth happening in the body, because that's essentially what cancer is unregulated, unwanted, rapid growth. And so by decreasing sugar intake, but by pairing sugar with other foods, we can help to regulate that insulin response. So the balance plate is really important. When carbohydrates have a protein partner, when they are full of fiber, when they have healthy fats at the same moment in time, you do not get that spike in blood sugar and that big insulin response. The protein, the fiber, and the fat act like a time release. So you absorb the sugar more slowly and you don't get as much of a spike in insulin. Okay, so I hope that that scientific explanation made sense. We can get more into it in the questions if people have questions, and that's always something you can reach out to me later for. I just want to share one study from a couple of years ago, from 2018, specifically looking at food frequency questionnaires. So these are surveys mailed to people, and this study was investigating an association, so not a cause and effect, but relationship between intake of sugary foods and risk of breast, prostate, and colorectal cancer. And in these surveys, people who said they had more sugar-sweetened beverages in their diet than people who had less, they did see an increased risk of cancer among the people who had more sugary beverages and also had more central body fatness. And so that combination increased risk a little bit. Okay, we're going to flip through some energy and metabolism, and then we're going to get into some questions in just a little bit. So first, I want to share 6 foods to boost your energy. No surprises here, and we just talked about a lot of these. But fruits, veggies, protein is really important for energy and immunity. Our immune cells are made out of protein. We need protein for energy. So whether you're having salmon, eggs, or plant-based proteins, you want to make sure you're getting protein. For anybody who's going through cancer treatment right now, whether you're recovering from surgery, you're in radiation, you're in chemotherapy, even immunotherapies, you need a little more protein than you would out of treatment for that healing, that recovery, that repair, and to keep your immune system strong. So make sure you're adding protein. Whole grains can be fun. Air popped popcorn, hey, that counts as a whole grain. Awesome. Nuts and seeds have a lot of energy promoting nutrients, and we talked about healthy fats. This is something, again, that you can take time to read later, but fighting fatigue. Fatigue is reported by 80 to 100% of people going through cancer treatment, or honestly, the cancer experience, post-diagnosis. Fatigue is probably the #1 side effect, and you all really have a better understanding of that than I do. And I really think this is something to think about treating, because it's going to translate into your overall quality of life. So a lot of the things we've talked about are going to help you with fighting fatigue, but making sure you're hydrating, sleeping, thinking about some integrative therapies. These are all things that can help you as well. What about metabolism? Whether you've gone into early menopause, so you've had to change your hormone levels as a part of your cancer treatment, or you're just in that age bracket, in that life cycle where you're in perimenopause, in menopause, or post-menopause, we definitely want to think about our metabolism. So again, protein is essential. I mentioned selenium, which is in those Brazil nuts, but also very prevalent in fish. So the Mediterranean style of eating is another thing to think about, and all these foods are very prevalent there. We need magnesium for metabolism. It's an electrolyte that helps with muscle cramps. We get that in green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds, and whole grains like oats. We need that fiber. Our gut health has a lot to do with our metabolism. So a healthy gut, believe it or not, can help you with keeping your muscle mass up and that metabolism. Caffeine and chili peppers or spicy foods can help metabolism, but they make hot flashes worse. So again, there's a level of customization and personalization you're going to want to think about. So if you're dealing with hormones and hot flashes, then don't go for those spicy and caffeinated foods as much for metabolism. Stick with the nuts and the fiber and some of the other items on there. So to balance hormones, you see the themes, right? You see that there are whole grains, fruits and veggies, and protein and omega-3s on all these slides. And that's intentional so that we understand the execution of this healthy diet can be simple. Calcium is really important for helping with our metabolism and our bones. And we can get that from dairy. We can also get that from green leafy vegetables, non-dairy dairy, essentially. So non-dairy milks and yogurts and ricotta and stuff like that. You can also get calcium that way. They're fortified. And tea, I thought would be fun to mention here. Hibiscus tea, green tea, mushroom teas are really popular now, and coffees made out of mushrooms for immunity and also for helping balance those hormones. And then phytoestrogens, which we heard earlier, may help reduce recurrence risk. They also can be helpful in the diet. It is not the same as estrogen. When we have tofu, tempeh, edamame, flax seeds, they are much weaker forms of estrogen and they are protective. But a lot of people aren't comfortable having soy because they think it has estrogen. And if they have an estrogen-driven cancer, that sounds like it should be a no-go. But in fact, the research does show the opposite, because plant-based estrogens from natural foods, like the ones I mentioned, tofu, tempeh, edamame, flaxseed, those are not overly concentrated. They're actually helpful. Things like soy protein powders, textured vegetable protein, soy flour, kind of the processed soy that's in bars and in powders, that we're not so sure about. So those you might want to avoid and go for a different type of plant-based protein powder, or if you're having dairy, maybe whey. We can talk about that in the Q&A if people have questions. But dairy intake, this is another one where there's a lot of internet myth. Dairy intake and risk of cancer is specific to the type of cancer. For breast cancer, it's been shown for many years that women who include low-fat dairy products have a lower risk of developing breast cancer, not a higher risk. Now, there's a whole host of reasons you might want to avoid dairy in your diet, and that's fine. But I do want to make sure we understand the data on cancer risk and make an informed decision. You might have a lactose intolerance. You might feel you're sensitive to dairy and it comes out in your skin, or in asthma or other things. It's fine. There's a lot of dairy-free options that are healthy. We don't have to have dairy, but it is an option, and it does not, in a low-fat capacity, increase the risk of developing breast cancer or a recurrence, and it might actually help promote sleep. Okay. So I want to talk about healthy snacks. So go ahead and type some of your favorite healthy snacks into the chat. And at the same time, I'm going to ask Jean to please come back and help me go through the Q&A and pick a couple of nutrition related questions, particularly on any topics we might have already just covered. And I'll take just a few, and then I want to keep going through the content so we can talk a little bit about things like intermittent fasting and exercise.
Great. There are a lot of questions, and one of them is intermittent fasting. So I won't ask that one, but there is a question that I think is important, particularly for people in treatment. So as you know, often you're switching treatments, particularly if you're metastatic. Some may cause diarrhea, and then others may cause constipation. So sort of going back and forth between a bland diet and then having constipation. So do you have any suggestions for really gut health in keeping better balance?
This is a great question. And yes, this is one of my favorite topics because it is so highly individualized and you can overcome a lot of those symptoms, that swinging back and forth. You can make it so much better, but it takes a lot of discipline. So the things that I will say kind of across the board that are helpful, it's really about, if you're having diarrhea, yes, kind of having blander foods, but that doesn't mean zero fiber. So let's think about the kinds of fiber that help both constipation and diarrhea. Things with that prebiotic fiber. The name of the game in gut health is supporting your microbiome. So talk to your team about the appropriateness of things like probiotics. I do want to say that anyone on immunotherapy should not take probiotics. Probiotics might reduce the effectiveness of immunotherapy drugs. Prebiotic fiber is just a marketing term that's making it confusing for people to know what's what. Prebiotics are just the fibers that are in like oats and the middle of an apple. So like baking apples, bananas, avocados, cooked vegetables like green beans and broccoli. Those prebiotic fibers in those foods help constipation and diarrhea, help your gut, and don't have any negative issues or contraindications, okay? So if you're in radiation, if you're in chemo, you might be able to take a probiotic, but you want to talk to your team and definitely not for immunotherapy. There are some fiber supplements on the market that may be helpful to include if you're swinging back and forth. Those small frequent meals are really important, in having beverages with electrolytes. There are a lot of healthy, clean options for that. And trying to have foods like oatmeal, cooked vegetables instead of salads, easy to digest proteins like maybe some baked chicken or a little bit of like a white fish, more like a haddock or a cod. Those are a couple of things that can be helpful for when you're swinging back and forth. And then obviously like reaching out to nutritionists to kind of help you make a personal plan. All right, let's take one more.
Okay, I'm going to combine a few together because I think you can answer them quickly because it's always confusing. Is soy milk considered a processed food?
Okay, it's a really good question. And it's kind of a hard answer because it's like yes and no. Sorry. So, I mean, the pro column is that soy milk is a complete protein. So you get all the amino acid building blocks of meat. You can get an unsweetened, absolutely, because that it has less of the added sugars in it or none. Soy milk in particular can be a little gassy for people. So if you are dealing with gut health, I would probably steer you towards a different option. And so it's a little bit in the middle. It's a lower FODMAP. It's okay for the gut, but not for everyone. It's a little bit processed. It's more processed than like tofu or edamame or tempeh. Those are like the least processed soy foods. So it's more processed than those, but it's less processed than like what's in a veggie burger or a bar or a protein powder. So it's kind of in the middle. You can make your own soy milk or you can get natural soy milk from like a health food store. I would call that unprocessed, I guess, or less processed.
Okay. Can I ask one more question or do you want to? Okay.
No,
so there's questions about lunch meat and nitrates. So what is nitrate free, and is lunch meat something people should just avoid completely, or are there some that are healthier choices?
Yeah. So again, in a perfect world, ideally, when we're making dinner, we make a few extra chicken breasts and then we cut that up and we have that in our sandwich, or a rotisserie chicken, or, Thanksgiving will be around the corner. So something like that you've made yourself, or that is not, processes in any way is best. These are details though. These are the leaves on the trees in the forest. Absolutely, without a doubt, eating the rainbow, getting at least 3 servings of vegetables and 2 servings of fruit every day is way more important. Exercise is way more important. So I'm not trying to say that the question around nitrates isn't important, but when we look at the overall, like, what do I want to focus my energy on mentally? That one is lower on the list than, am I getting my 5 a day? Am I eating the rainbow? Am I exercising? So I just want to kind of put that out there. But yeah, so looking for the nitrate free is better. So there are a lot of brands that just use like celery extract instead of sodium nitrate. But we still want to keep these things to like a few times a week and steer clear of the red meat options and go for more of the turkey and chicken options on that. And yes, look for the nitrate free. And if you're in chemo and you're immunocompromised, you are supposed to like microwave lunch meat first, which might make it sound less appealing. And then you might just want to pick something else.
Okay. I want to just ask, you mentioned that those taking immunotherapy should stay away from probiotics. There's a question is, are there studies they could read more about this? And then if you can address just supplements, and is it ever better to have supplements, or is food the better way to get these nutrients?
Okay, so I'm gonna punt the supplement till the end because
Okay.
I'll get to that in a sec. But that's such a good question, and that really could be like its own presentation because there's so many nuances. As far as studies on immunotherapy and contraindications with probiotics, yes, there are research studies, and I'm happy to email these, the team some examples of that to share out on your website, or we can write a blog post on it or something like that. But there is emerging research looking at eating fruits and vegetables and colorful plant foods as helping immunotherapy potentially work better, and that taking a probiotic pill might reduce the effectiveness. You can still eat yogurt, which has probiotics in it. You can still drink kefir. You can eat sauerkraut. You can eat sourdough bread. It's not about foods. It's really specifically concentrated supplements, which are honestly added to a lot of things. So we can get more into that. That's emerging and something new that I did want to make sure to share with everyone. All right. So I'm going to...
Yeah, go back, or I'm just going to keep asking you questions.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to jump back into the slides, and then we'll get to some more questions in about, less than 10 minutes from now. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jean. Okay, so everybody listed in the chat, thank you so much. Really cool examples of healthy snacks. So I encourage everyone to flip through that, take some notes. You got some great new ideas of things that you can have. This is just an example of a balanced bowl that we were talking about. And I listed some of the hero ingredients and nutrients that you'll find in here. And so there is a grain, you see the quinoa there. You see this bowl has lots of good nutrients. So these are fun things to make and play with at home. So superfoods, this is another common question that I get, and this is just something I wanted to share. How can we include superfoods in our diet? These are things that would be better for you to get as a food than as a supplement. So there are foods with probiotics like kombucha or Greek yogurt, and essentially superfoods are really healthy foods that have gotten popular because of really great marketing. So do they live up to the hype of their marketing? Not necessarily, but they're amazing foods from all over the world that have those plant-based nutrients that support our immune system, reduce inflammation, and boost our energy and metabolism. So there are all kinds of berries. Blueberries are great, but you can have fun experimenting with other berries from around the world, like currants or goji berries or acai berries, and make like a smoothie bowl. Having a rounded out experience of omega-3s besides fish, you can go for chia or flax or hemp seeds. If anybody loves chocolate, cacao powder is a great way to add a little bit more antioxidants and plant-based nutrients into some favorite dishes. Now let's talk about intermittent fasting, and then we're going to talk about exercise and take some more questions. So timing is everything. Should you be doing intermittent fasting, and what is it all about? So briefly, intermittent fasting is when you give yourself a window, potentially a longer window than usual, overnight without eating. Now, intermittent fasting is not for weight loss. It honestly does not help promote weight loss, even though it's pitched online often as a weight loss plan. Intermittent fasting is really about anti-aging and immune potential. So the idea is that by giving yourself a break from eating and drinking overnight, you're putting less work on some of your vital organs, like your liver, your pancreas, etc. And so less work essentially means less burnout and a longer time for your body to be in its own healing and repair mode. So at least 12 hours overnight is a good way if you want to practice this and see if it's something that clicks for you. Usually people do either 12 or 14 or even 16 hours without eating overnight. Anyone going through menopause or dealing with hormonal ups and downs, 16 hours is an awfully long time and sometimes isn't really effective. If you want to try it, you might do more of that 12 to 14. And it's not so much about starving yourself when you wake up until you can't take it anymore and then eating everything in sight. That's not really what is going to be most helpful. It's really more about stopping eating earlier in the evening. So avoiding late night alcohol intake, snacking, and sugar is fantastic for your insulin levels, insulin resistance, and for your overall health. So a kitchen's closed mentality, let's say by like 8 o'clock at night as an example. And then in the morning, if you wake up really hungry, then you should eat. But if you wake up and you're like, oh, do I have to force myself to eat breakfast right now? Maybe that's a day to experiment and try some intermittent fasting. Fasting, like not eating at all 24 hours before chemo, is something that is out there and being promoted and has some literature, but we're not at the point of recommending that for a host of reasons. Patients tend to get dehydrated. They tend to contribute to being malnourished or depleted in important nutrients like magnesium or electrolytes or protein. So we are not recommending like fasting. Intermittent fasting is more about keeping yourself on a schedule of eating that works for you and might help balance your blood sugar. Same thing with exercise. You might do a little bit of strength training in the morning when you've been fasting, and that might be a way of helping some hormones and helping wake up your metabolism, but having some beverages with some electrolytes in that time. Okay, now what about fitness? One of the oncologists that I worked with for a really long time would always say this quote, and I thought it was really great. And he'd always say, exercise is like a medicine in the fight against breast cancer. Separately from diet, exercise has tremendous benefits. And honestly, it's physical activity. You don't have to be like training for a marathon to be physically active. Being active boosts your energy level, your mood. It supports your immune system. Being sedentary or overtraining can actually suppress your immunity. You want to be active without going overboard to help boost your immune system and to fight fatigue. One of the best ways of fighting fatigue is movement. And I know that sounds surprising, but you want to match the movement, the length of time, and the intensity to how you feel. So it might just be that you're walking around your house for 10 minutes. That's great. You might do some yoga stretches. That's great. You might get out some weights and go for it. And that's good too, right? You got to match it to how you feel. Being active helps your gut health, and it really helps promote that microbiome and strengthening your gut. It also, like walking, can help to reduce nausea, heartburn, and constipation because you're also helping the muscles of your digestive system move as well. You can balance your hormones like insulin. You can balance blood sugar, so get those things down, separate from the effort you make in your diet. And even virtually, you can be connected to others and get that social benefit going. This is really interesting. So, I'm as a nutritionist, what do I read in my spare time? Recipes. I read other things too, but I read recipes and I read exercise journals. And this just came out last month. And essentially what this whole slide says is that working out in the morning is really the best time of day, especially if you are trying to build that in as a new habit or you're struggling to manage your weight. And it's two reasons why. Why should you work out in the morning? Number one, it helps you make that habit. So some of it is just literally the studies found that people who worked out in the morning were just simply more likely to do it on a regular basis. So don't ignore that as being meaningful. It's incredibly meaningful. The other part was physiological in terms of helping you balance what you're eating throughout the day, in terms of your metabolism and hormones that are involved in that, and in terms of promoting sleep, which also helps manage weight. There was the physiological benefit of exercising in the morning as well. So you don't have to wake up at the crack of dawn. We need sleep, but making time for self-care, whether it is 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, or an hour, doing that in the morning as you start your day and making that a habit is really going to be the most helpful to you. I mentioned pacing yourself. starting slowly and celebrating achievements. If you are really deconditioned and you get up to 10 minutes of walking without stopping, you should celebrate without a food celebration. Pick a non-food reward, right? Call a friend, order something fun, paint your nails, whatever it can be anything, right? And there are other kinds of therapies. So besides like, riding a bike or, walking, things like Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, integrative therapies for exercise can really help with fatigue and help with immunity as well. So I'm leaving this up here as we get back to questions, just so that everybody knows how to get in touch with me. If you have other questions, you want to email me, you want to go on my website or join my Instagram community, that's great. And this is just how you can get in touch with me. But I'm going to ask Jean to, with the remaining time we have here, let's go through some more questions. I know supplements, I'll start with that while Jean's reading. So supplements, as I mentioned, there's just a lot of specificity to it, and I didn't feel we had like time to dive into that here. But in general, going for food is the best approach. However, there are definitely times when patients are going to be recommended or should be recommended to take supplements. So if you have not had a vitamin D blood test in the last year, please ask whoever draws your blood to check that for you. A lot of people are deficient in vitamin D, and if so, you do want to take a supplement. It's going to be too hard to overcome a deficiency from diet alone. And with the sun, we're getting into the time of year where we don't have as much direct sunlight, but you need to be wearing sunscreen, especially if you're going through treatment because you're more photosensitive. So get a vitamin D blood test. And there's a lot of literature with COVID looking at immunity and the importance of getting adequate vitamin D. So you might want to be taking a supplement there. Magnesium is something that I mentioned, many food sources, but certain treatments can make you lose more magnesium naturally into your urine. And if you're having diarrhea, you might be getting rid of too much magnesium through those increased bowel movements. So if your blood level of magnesium is low, and that's something your doctor would check if you're in active chemo, then you probably will need to be taking a supplement, or you might even be getting an IV. In general, though, if you're not deficient, getting it from your diet is perfect. Now, if you suffer from muscle cramps, if you have trouble sleeping, there might be some things there. Antioxidants like vitamin C, vitamin E, or selenium, those are supplements you want to avoid if you're going through radiation or if you have certain kinds of chemo, especially like platinum drugs, because there's tons of research for like 15 years now that high dose supplements of antioxidants can reduce the effectiveness of those types of treatments. But again, some supplements help. So this is really where you want to talk to your doctor, you want to talk to your dietitian and kind of find out specifically for you what you should take and what you should not take. So hopefully, Jean, that was an overview.
Yeah, and you actually answered another question. So just so everyone knows, we'll invite Stacy back to do an Ask the Expert where we'll just do Q&A because we know everyone has a lot of questions. But you talked about interactions of antioxidants when you're in chemotherapy. What about foods that might help for loss of estrogen, whether you're in surgical menopause or in menopause because of hormone anti-estrogen therapy, or bone pain, neuropathy? Are there foods that can actually relieve some of those symptoms?
Okay, perfect. I'm going to just put this one back up because this is a good one for the hormone question. So if you're struggling with estrogen, these are foods to include in your diet that may help to some extent with some of those hormone swings in the experience of it, like fatigue and weight gain and hot flashes. Limiting alcohol, caffeine, and spicy food is also important as well. I should make one that says what to avoid. So anyway, but those three you'd want to limit. And then exercise is something that can really help. So specifically, strength training is a requirement for managing estrogen hormonal changes and menopause. And that has to do with helping to overcome the natural reduction in muscle and increase in body fat that happens when estrogen levels go down, but it actually helps your body with balancing its own production of estrogen in a healthy way. So as much as like walking, or people who love jogging, or people who are like cardio junkies, that's great. You absolutely need to start including some kind of strength training. Now, you don't have to be bench pressing, plates of crazy amounts of weight like my teenage son wants to do. You can use your own body weight. So planks, push-ups, they can be on your knees. They can be against a wall. You can do squats with like a ball against the wall. You can do squats on your own. But strength training is not like a nice to have thing. It is definitely an essential when we're thinking about the hormonal balance. And then I feel like there was a second part to your question, Jean.
What was also just pain, neuropathy.
Pain and neuropathy, yes. So for pain management, having anti-inflammatory foods might help to some extent. Now, obviously, you have to take the medicines your doctors prescribe. So unaddressed pain reduces your immune function. So if you're struggling with pain and your team has recommended pain meds and you want to just tough it out, my advice would be to take what they're recommending you take, but also to do things to help manage the side effects. So pain medicines do tend to cause constipation. So you want to know that ahead of time, and you want to eat those, gut health promoting foods we talked about, stay hydrated, stay active to help offset constipation that might happen with pain meds. With neuropathy in general and just pain, anti-inflammatory is eating the rainbow, reducing sugar, reducing ultra-processed foods, having those colorful fruits and vegetables and plant foods to help minimize inflammation. Also, if it's recommended for you and you can ask your doctor, there might be some kinds of like cancer massage therapy or other types of therapeutic touch that might help. For neuropathy, sometimes B vitamins like B12 and B6, which are also good for metabolism and energy in general, those might help manage some of the symptoms of neuropathy. Or like alpha lipoic acid is another supplement that's a healthy fat. Those do not tend to have drug interactions, but with any supplement, you always want to go ask your team. And then lastly, with neuropathy, it's managing temperature. So as we're getting into colder weather in some of the areas where you live, you want to be mindful that cold temperature, you might feel it even more so like in your hands and feet where you're experiencing that neuropathy. So having extra socks, warm boots, it doesn't matter if it's October and you're cracking those like ski warmer things and sticking them in your gloves or in your shoes, that's fine. Keep yourself warm and keep yourself comfortable. Have some warm tea and like hold your glass, or some warm soup. Really go for those comforting, nourishing things that temperature wise may also even help a little bit.
So thank you so much, Stacy. You are a font of knowledge, and we really, really appreciate. I hope you're looking at the chat. If you're feeling any low self-esteem, this should boost you.
Bye. Thank you.